The United Nations General Assembly voted to pass a Palestinian-drafted resolution that, among other demands, calls for Israel to evacuate from the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria. Now, through this resolution is not binding, but it calls on a number of member nations to stop supplying weapons to Israel. Now, this UN action occurred the same day that the U.S. House of Representatives took a different course and passed the Anti-BDS Labeling Act, which challenges the anti-Israel boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Joining me now to discuss this and much more, Congressman Greg Steube. He serves on the House Ways and Means Committee and the Select Subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. He represents the 17th Congressional District of Florida. Congressman Steube, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
So two contrasts yesterday with the House of Representatives supporting Israel, even as most UN member nations passed a resolution that would threaten their very existence.
Yeah, I asked the question, why are we a part of the UN? I've voted repeatedly to repeal our funding to the UN. It was 124 to like 13 or 14. So you had 124 nations say that Israel doesn't have the ability, that has to give up its sovereignty in its own lands that it won in the War of 1967. I mean, it's just amazing to me how corrupt the UN is, how it's run by obviously China and Russia and Arab nations, that a sovereign nation, Israel, has to give up part of its sovereignty, which is the Gaza Strip, to the Palestinians who, oh, by the way, have never had a country. There is not a country called Palestine. So it's just fascinating where we're at in the world, where 124 nations feel like Israel, one, shouldn't defend itself, and two, should give up part of its land to basically a country run by terrorists.
Any surprises on the House floor yesterday as the House took up the anti-BDS measure that would simply say, hey, you can't penalize Israel and companies based in Israel?
Yeah, the surprise is Jewish Democrats oppose that bill. They oppose the labeling of made from Israel out of those areas that are Israel's sovereign land. I mean, it's just kind of fascinating how political anything to do with Israel is, even with Jewish Democrats who voted against the bill. Schneider himself, who debated against the bill. I don't know. I feel like we're just, we know we're at the end times and we're walking towards that direction. So nothing that we're seeing should surprise us if we've read the Bible. But it's just fascinating how Democratic Jewish members will not vote for a bill simply to say that things made from Judea and Samaria should say made from Israel.
Speaking of the end times and where things are headed, I want to switch gears to a piece of legislation that you introduced last week. I mean, this is something that if you follow the trail of Romans chapter 1, you would think that this is where we're at. But last week, you introduced legislation to prohibit taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries for illegal immigrants in the custody of the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, why is that legislation even needed?
Well, it shouldn't be needed, just like we shouldn't have to have a bill that says that only women play in women's sports. But unfortunately, we're in a place in our society today where you have to pass that bill and it dies in the Senate to ensure that there's not biological men competing with women in women's sports. But same type of thing here. You would think that no way that America is spending taxpayer dollars to do gender transition surgeries for trans inmates and illegal immigrants in our country. But this is something that Kamala Harris supports. This is something that she has, you played the clip that she did when she was Attorney General in the state of California. And I'm filing a bill that says that our federal tax dollars shouldn't go to gender transition surgeries for illegal immigrants. It's sad that we have to take these kind of steps. What's also sad is this bill would probably only pass on party lines on the House floor and wouldn't see the light of day in the Senate because Chuck Schumer runs the Senate and Democrats would absolutely oppose this piece of legislation.
I mean, this is kind of like the SAVE Act that the House passed that says you've got to be here illegally and you have to be an American citizens to be able to vote in elections. They oppose that. These are people who are in the country illegally, they're in custody, and they're demanding these surgeries and medical treatment that are unnecessary and costly.
Yep, and our tax dollars are picking up the tab, and hopefully this bill will move through the House process. It hasn't been referred yet, but I imagine it's going to get referred to the Judiciary Committee. I know Jim Jordan would push that bill out of his committee, and hopefully it'll get a vote on the House floor. We don't have a lot of time left in this Congress. We're not supposed to be here in October to give members time to be back in their districts to campaign. And then after the election, you've got a couple weeks in November and a couple weeks in December. So God willing, President Trump wins in November. Obviously, a lot of these things will be changed with a different administration who does not support this type of federal government spend. And you'll have a bunch of cabinet officials who also don't support this. A complete change in our government, which would be very welcome. But if necessary, I'll file the bill again next Congress, and we'll keep working.
A final question for you, Congressman Greg Steube. You're from Florida. The last attempt on President Trump at the golf course, another attempted assassination. What's going on? Is this the result of a federal government, in particular the Secret Service, that has been overrun with DEI as opposed to proficiency in their mission?
Well, these are all facts. You have Secretary Mayorkas who refused multiple requests by Trump's team for more assets and more security. And this was before the Butler shooting. You've had multiple attempts from Trump's Secret Service team to get more assets. He's denied that. Why? When you have the Secret Service agent saying we need more assets to protect a former president, why did Secretary Mayorkas deny that? You have a fundamental breakdown, in my opinion, of what happened at Butler, Pennsylvania. We still, as members of Congress, don't have answers as to who was there that day. Let's depose them. Let's ask questions. How in the world, as a military service member who served in the war on terror and served in Iraq, how in the world can a guy get up on a roof with a rifle and you have 4 snipers around that location and they not see him? Some reports say that they saw him for 20 minutes. Why in the world was he not engaged before he got shots off? And then thankfully you have the situation in Florida where a Secret Service agent saw a gun muzzle sticking out of the bushes and actually took action and prevented a shooting from occurring. But the Palm Beach County Sheriff made an interesting remark. He said if he was the current president, we would have had that entire golf course locked down. Well, why in the world aren't they doing that now? Obviously, there's been threats on his life. Obviously, Trump's team, his security team, has said we need more assets, and this administration is refusing to provide that to him. It's incompetence at best. It's certainly a dereliction of duty, and it's certainly an intentional act on behalf of Mayorkas to not give them the security that his own detail is saying that they need to protect him.
Congressman Greg Steube, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Anytime.